talked about what is the correlation between heat and energy. I mean, why there is a terminology called energy and there is another terminology called heat. And perhaps we had some clue in the last class that what is heat and what is energy. And then we tried to see, like, how exactly different energy transformations that take place, leading to different engineering processes. It's a kind of bird's eye view we are taking before we really get into the numbers and the models that help us in really modeling the engineering processes. So energy is a more high quality entity, whereas heat is in general you are generating when you are going for any engineering process, and that engineering process is actually leading to what, some products. So essentially you are having a part of budget, which can be in the form of money or in the form of energy. That budget you are spending in the form of heat, and then what is happening, like, you are generating the product out of it, right? So this is the overall bird's eye view of any engineering process, and we discussed about, like, thermal power plant and then refrigeration, just to highlight, like, heat transfer is a reality in every engineering process. It can be computational industry, it can be chemical industry, it can be electronic industry, it can be mobile industry, it can be any industry where, heat transfer is one of the major aspects that you need to really know, right? Now we finished the discussion with one of the main components of heat transfer studies is with the heat exchanger, the entity that is called, the engineering device that is called the heat exchangers. Okay. Now, see, we are not going to finish the discussion related to heat exchangers, but right now we are trying to get an overview of what are the heat exchangers, how exactly they are classified. See, since Friday until tomorrow, I will try to give you an overview on what are the different aspects of heat transfer that are important in the engineering devices, which will give you the cue that then why we really study, say, suppose conduction, say, suppose convection, say, suppose radiation, right? Different heat transfer modes, which are not individually present, but perhaps collectively present in all these devices, and then how mathematically treat them, and then come up with the engineering and design parameters, right? So you may see that this particular classification in this slide is made based on the construction of a heat exchanger, right? So subsequently you will see different slides are coming. So next slide, it is a classification of heat exchangers based on the surface compactness. Okay, then number of fluids. So these are essentially different types of heat exchangers. This is based on heat transfer mechanism. So what I'm trying to say, that heat exchangers is such a huge subject area, and it is prevalent. Say, suppose starting from your railway engine to your aircraft, to inside the reactors, okay, nuclear reactors, normal reactors, right? Everywhere you will find heat exchanger inside your computer, car, automobile, everywhere you will find this particular technology. Of course, post-industrial revolution, 1700, for last 300 years, knowledge have been, have been summarized into your book, which is perhaps very difficult to comprehend in 3-4 months. But at the end of the day, we have to really have a kind of a very broader, overview on these things before we really get into the details of conduction, convection, and radiation. That's the reason why I wanted to really share with you. Say, suppose construction-wise, if you classify the heat exchangers, right? So what are the different types? You may see here, it is given as, say, it is a tubular reactor. It can be a plate-type reactor. Okay, it can be an extended surface reactor. It can be It can be regenerative reactor. So in tubular, you can see double pipe, shell and tube. So it's a double pipe heat exchanger. It's a shell and tube heat exchanger, right? So a plate type we will see later. Extended surface. These are all fin tube heat exchangers. Okay, these are all extended surface. So why are we doing that? A common sense is that, say this yellow surface, which was a tube, maybe the heat transfer was less, so I just added a few fins. So you can think about that. See, if some hot fluid is going through the middle, then what happens? Like, if you only have a yellow surface, what will happen? The heat transfer will be smaller. Since these extended fins are there, what will happen? Through these fins, you can really conduct a little bit more heat out of this particular process. So these surfaces will help you in conducting more heat out of the system. Right. So sporadically we are looking at different different aspects of heat exchangers, but you will see as we progress and go closer towards the finish of the course, you will see slowly everything will gel up in a single place. To understand that, what are these heat exchangers, where are they used, how exactly. I think you will have a problem to model these heat exchangers, these shell and tube heat exchangers. You have done drawing courses on the flanges, okay, on the nuts and the bolts, okay. You have done the strength of material course in order to really, design these shells and all mechanics classes, right? So overall, the engineering curriculum, you will see that it's all broken down into pieces to really work on the different parts of the strength of materials, fluid mechanics, okay, and then the movement of the fluid, right? And then, the transfer of heat here based on conduction, convection, and radiation. You may see that here all the three modes are a possibility, that through pipes it can be conducting. Maybe when the fluid is flowing, it will be convecting. And if it is a very high temperature process, radiative heat transfer will be there. So we really need to know those modeling aspects, those fundamental, conceptual and theoretical aspects in order to really have, in order to really have a overview on or in-depth view on the heat transfer processes into the system. So I think, process equipment design, you have a course as you progress. Once you have adequate knowledge of strength of materials, fluid mechanics, thermodynamics, heat transfer. So in the process equipment and design, drawing and design, you will make a design of a heat exchanger. So that's a part of your curriculum, right? And it's most of the times it's a shell and tube heat exchanger. So you can see heat exchangers can be classified into different types based on the construction. The surface compactness, okay. So what do I mean by surface compactness? So it can be compact, it can be non-compact, okay. Compactness means what? So you can think about this is a kind of non-compact process because you are allowing the fluid to flow as is. Now here you may see that you can really create, very intricate design structures. This type of heat exchangers are used in computers, in supercomputers, so that, say, suppose the heat is, and you have a microprocessor, right? And this microprocessor, more it is doing work, more it is doing like, processing data. What is happening? It is generating heat. So you are supplying electrical energy. This electrical energy is getting converted to thermal energy. Now, moment the thermal energy is in action, what is happening? Your processing speed is going down, right? There is a chance that, if the heat is accumulated, if you enter a server room, if you really enter a supercomputer room, you will see like, huge air conditioners are moving around in different places. More importantly, not only those air conditioners outside, on top of each and every microprocessor, you have got very, very efficient heat exchangers. They are sitting just to withdraw the heat so that the temperature of the microprocessor is at the lowest. And then, the current voltage signals are not really, changed too much so that there will be computational errors. That, this is nothing but a game of, current to voltage, right? Whatever information, whatever data that we are transmitting, processing, and then utilizing for our own purpose. Now, in that situation, if it heats up, you know that this current voltage characteristics will go to haywire, and then from there, what will happen? The heat exchangers, the heat accumulation will take place, and many times you may see that if the heat is too high, computer will go for a shutdown, and all these things will happen. So typically, you can imagine the microprocessor is at the bottom, and you put a heat exchanger like this at the top, and then you have a fan which is blowing air, so that this is not getting heated up, and this is withdrawing the heat from the microprocessor. So you can really use these compact heat exchangers in different types of high throughput cooling processes, right? So now heat exchangers can also be classified based on number of fluids. So suppose if you have a boiler, so it's a two-phase process, right? You have a liquid and a gas. So it's a kind of two-fluid process. It can be two liquids also, two different phases. So suppose it can be oil and water. So based on that, you can also classify heat exchangers. Those are called multi-phase, multi-component heat exchangers, based on the heat transfer mechanism, right? So single phase convection, you see this is a simple mechanism. Single phase convection on one side and two-phase convection on the other side. Single phase means it is only, say suppose, water. Two-phase means it is, say suppose, aqueous liquid water and gaseous water. So there's a two-phase convection on the other. So it's a typical boiler configuration, right? So based on heat transfer mechanism also, you can really have many different types of heat exchangers which has been given here. Then transfer processes. Say suppose this is the one that this particular shell and tube heat exchanger, you can imagine that this liquid is coming from here, and this gray part is totally isolated from this white part. Say in this white part there is a fluid that is flowing, and from the gray part there is another fluid flowing, and they are not mixing with each other. They are independent to it. They are totally isolated from each other, because in no way the design allows, say suppose this particular liquid is coming from there, they are flowing through these white pipes and they are going out from here. Whereas this particular fluid is coming from here, it is flowing outside and it is going out from it is going out from here, right? So it is coming from here and it is going out from here. So this gray fluid is not at all mixing with the white fluid. So this is called what? This type of heat exchangers are called non-contact. Whereas there are many heat exchangers which can really make physical contact heat exchangers. How is that? Say suppose air is coming from the bottom and water is coming from the top, and they are mixing with each other. So suppose you have a reactor, right? Where you are distributing, you are undergoing a reaction, right? And then during the reaction, you are blowing air. So while the reaction is taking place, while things are heated out, you are basically utilizing, you are evaporating water, and this water is getting getting boiled or evaporated, and you are collecting that. So heated water. So these are called the direct contact. So there are during the way you handle the fluids, based on that you can really have different types of heat exchangers, indirect contact and direct contact type. Next, you can also have based on the flow arrangement, right? So you see here, one of the fluids, say suppose blue is an indication of a cold fluid, and red is an indication of a hot fluid, right? So the cold fluid is entering and the hot fluid is going out. Whereas here you can see a kind of hot fluid is coming and it is being cooled down here, right? Now in this situation, you may see that both the fluids are flowing in the same direction. This particular heat exchanger is called a kind of co-current heat exchanger. Both the hot and cold fluid are moving towards the same direction. Whereas if you do the other way around, say suppose the hot fluid is flowing in the opposite direction to the cold fluid, that is called a kind of counter current, right? It can also be a cross flow. It can be a cross counter flow. So different types of fluid flow arrangements are available for different types of heat exchangers, and you can really classify the heat exchangers based on, say, counter flow, parallel flow, cross flow, split flow, divided flow, right? Different types of things are possible. Now, see, there are different types of heat exchangers, which are called the compact heat exchangers, right? So this is a kind of a plate heat exchanger, which is called a kind of compact heat exchanger. So here you may see that this blue fluid, see, it is nothing but, see, these plates are having some veins, right? Now those veins are so, and these plates are, arranged and stacked in such a manner so that, say, suppose from this inlet you have a liquid coming in, right? Now that liquid will flow through a particular plate. I will have the outlet managed in such a manner that particular fluid will flow on a particular plate. Whereas, if you look at the hot plate, you may see that, say, this is the cold plate and this is flanked by the two hot plates. So essentially what I'm trying to do, I have taken a plate, I have drawn veins inside, and then I have taken another plate, I have drawn veins inside, and then I have stacked them together like that. And I'm making sure that, say, suppose if they are stacked like that, one of the gaps between a pair of plates is where I have the hot fluid, cold fluid, and other one I have the hot fluid. So in this process, what I can do, I can really flow the hot fluid throughout this and take it out like that, whereas I have flowing the cold fluid and take out that. So this is kind of, these are all very latest. If you go to the website of Chevron, Chevron is one of the leading companies of making these plate type heat exchangers. While Shell and tube heat exchangers, you may see it will be the size of a room, whereas plate exchanger you may see just sitting in the corner of a room. It's a compact, process intensified process, which are the modern heat exchangers. Okay. So you can see that there are different types of heat exchangers are possible. Now, it looks a bit overwhelming at this stage that, there are so many different things that I need to really manage. But then as you progress, you will see that engineering is nothing but, decoupling all these complexities and then, go in a step-by-step mode in order to really, by the time I think you graduate, you will see that you will model a plate type heat exchanger. You will also model a kind of shell and tube heat exchanger, right? So should not be an issue. I mean, you really have to really join the dots in terms of fluid mechanics, in terms of thermodynamics, in terms of heat transfer, okay, in terms of your computer algorithms, okay, numerical methods, and then you have to gel them up in a course called Process Equipment Design and Drawing. Great. So to start with the fundamentals, heat transfer has a very big correlation with thermodynamics. Why? Because the word thermodynamics tells that thermo means heat and dynamics means motion. So essentially, thermodynamics is nothing but the flow of heat. Okay. So the science of energy and its transformation, and the main parameter that we are focusing there is called the heat, right? So we just need to know a few very important aspects of thermodynamics before really getting into the parameterization of the heat transfer. What are those? Those are these postulates and the laws. Okay, so how many students are there right now in the class? Say about 75, right? Now, let me just tell you that this particular slide you should archive. I just have made this slide for all of you. Why am I telling you this thing? Because this can be a very common question. Moment you tell that your favorite subject is heat transfer or thermodynamics to any of the interview that you will face in the future, the first question will come: what are the postulates and laws of thermodynamics? So I'm giving you a clue that when you face an interview, if you really want to relax for first 5-10 minutes and have some common questions, you should invite the examiner, invite your interviewer to this domain, so that they ask that what are the laws of thermodynamics and what are the postulates of thermodynamics. And if you really can connect these two, conduction, convection, and radiation, with very simple laws, I have seen a lot of jobs that has happened over last 10-15 years at IIT Guwahati. And students kept running from the interview room to my office, telling that, sir, this was a fantastic strategy. This actually worked, right? So you should not only prepare yourself as a good engineer, to understand things, but simultaneously the purpose of this course also to prepare yourself with the details, with the components that are going to prepare you for the things that you have come to IIT. Your purpose of coming to IIT to become a very good engineer, your purpose of coming to IIT to become a very good professional, and the basis of a professional to get integrated to a very professional company at the early stage of your career, learn the intricate details of professionalism. In order to facilitate that, my request to all of you, all 75 students, whomsoever is there, please archive this slide. So what is the question that you are inviting here from an interviewer? What are the laws of thermodynamics? What is the answer? There are 5 postulates and 4 laws, right? Make it clear. There are 5 postulates and 4 laws, right? And that is written in this particular slide. What are the first postulate? It says that internal, it's basically defined. It defines the internal energy, okay? The first postulate, starts with the terminology which is called internal energy. So internal energy for systems at internal equilibrium is an intrinsic property related to the characteristics related to its characteristic coordinates, right? So first postulate defines what is internal energy. Then come the 0th law of thermodynamics. So what are the 4 laws? 0, first, second, third. These are the 4 laws, right? And then how many postulates? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First is what? First is the definition of internal energy. Now, then comes the 0th law. What is postulate 2? That is nothing but the first law of thermodynamics. There are some intermixing takes place. You all know that change of internal energy is equal to the change of heat and the work done. So internal energy has 2 components essentially. One is the part associated with heat, which is the low quality energy, and one is the part which is associated with work, which is the highest quality of energy. Typically in an engineering process, you want to make it dW heavy. Why in the beginning of the process, you want to make the whole thing dW heavy and dQ thin, right? And then as you do the process, what will happen? dQ will increase and dW will reduce. So that's a natural process of having a kind of engineering process going towards its destination as planned, right? Now, what is the postulate 3? Postulate 3 is nothing but the definition of entropy, because until this point, you do not know in which direction you are doing the energy conservation. So postulate 3 talks about the definition of entropy, a parameter where it says that more you produce the heat, more you go towards a natural process. What is a natural process? Say suppose water is falling from a waterfall. So you can see, since there is an elevation, water will go always from top to bottom, but it will never go back from bottom to top. Now, what is the reason? The reason behind that is you are generating a lot of heat while you are going down like that. Until or unless you invest that much amount of work which you are generated in the form of heat, it is not going to go back to the original state. And that's what is postulate 3 is all about. Right now, postulate 4 talks about, once you define what is entropy, which is dQ reversible by T, then you talk about the second law of thermodynamics, which is postulate 4. So the entropy change for any natural process is positive. And that gives the direction to the system. Energy balance doesn't give you the direction of the system. Energy balance will tell that, okay, once you have pressed the piston, you can really take it back. It's a reversible domain. Whereas the concept of irreversibility comes from the postulate 4, which is the second law of thermodynamics. And then postulate 5, what does it tell? It tells that any physical parameter, any engineering parameter, Okay, you can really for a macroscopic property for any engineering parameter of homogeneous PVT system at internal equilibrium can be expressed as functions of temperature, pressure, and composition. So this is where you first introduce the concept of modeling. So suppose you want to define internal energy, U. So U is a function of what? U is nothing but a function of, say, temperature, pressure, and composition. Enthalpy is a function of temperature, pressure, composition, right? Any parameter you bring in, you can really start developing the fundamental equations, from the postulate 5, which tells you what are those parameters through which the formulation starts, through which the quantitative analysis can be started. And then last is what third law of thermodynamics. What is the third law of thermodynamics? It is basically the definition of entropy. Rather, it talks about how entropy is to be evaluated, calculated. So essentially, you assume that at 0 Kelvin, there is no entropy, which is not correct. There is some sort of disorder is also there, but then you say that it is there. And then from there, how do you evaluate the entropy change? That is what is about the third law of thermodynamics. So overall, there are 5 postulates and 4 laws. Any question you have up to this point? Anybody has any question up to this point? No questions? Such a complicated subject, you have understood everything. Okay, so let me just progress to the next slide. Now, can you tell me now what is heat? Can any one of you tell me what is heat? Hello? Yeah, somebody can tell me what is heat? Nobody is interested in answering the question.
Sir, it is a form of energy which changes temperature.
Which changes temperature, right? What is work?
Yes, sir.
What is work?
It is a form of energy which where force where force does some work.
No, how do you say? Suppose you are given, first law of thermodynamics, right?
Yes, sir.
First law of thermodynamics. What is your name? I mean, I'm unable to see the year. Can you please spell out your name?
So Dishank.
Dishank, yeah. So I'm sure you are aware of this.
Yes, sir.
This first law, right? Du equal to dq by dq plus dw, right?
Yes, sir.
So let us hit a very healthy debate here.
Okay, sir.
What is this U? What is this Q and what is this W? If you are an engineer, what is your interpretation about U, Q, and W? So essentially, I'm working on these first 3 parameters: heat, work, and internal energy. Okay. And I'm telling you, if you are really clearing up this doubt right now,
yes, sir.
Okay, say first 5 questions, if you tell that your favorite subject is thermodynamics in any interview forum, first 5 questions will be common and you will breeze through with those first 5 questions. And most of the times in the books, this is not written. This requires a discussion. This requires a kind of debate, to clarify these things in a very, very neat manner before you really get into, and you need not remember. I don't remember these things even. If you ask me to deliver a lecture tomorrow, I'll be talking completely different thing about the same slide. But of course, the heart of the whole story will remain the same, and conceptually it will be very similar, right? So you tell me what is internal energy, what is Q, and what is W? Why they are placed like this in front of you? You tell whatever is there in your mind. I'm just going to refine it. Okay, and in the process, you will say it will emerge. The understanding will emerge.
Sir, I think for heat, it is the measure of energy of a system, means how much energy the system has.
It is the other way around. Maybe the internal energy is a measure of that. Okay, for a closed system.
Okay.
Right?
Yes,
See,
sir.
when you go to market, you have a budget, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, who is HP? You know, he wants to say something. Somebody else wants to say something? Hemant, you want to say something?
Sir, I want to say about work also. So means it is the main thing which we want in means in any process. The work is our main motive.
Very true.
We
Yes.
want the maximum of it we want to maximize basically work what we are getting the as the output by giving the input as heat and dq, that what we are input what we are given, and we want to maximize the work, and that's it.
Yes, yes, very, very true. Say DU is the total. Say, suppose if you just open your wallet, right?
Yes.
At this stage, if you just open your wallet, if whatever money you have, that is your DU.
Okay, sir.
Now, say, suppose you go to market and you purchase fruits, right? When you do that, when you go to market and purchase fruit, that is your DW, because you had 100 rupees in your wallet.
Okay.
If you did not have 100 rupees in your wallet, okay, that is you, then you would not have any DW, right? Your DU is 0, so there is no DQ or DW. Now, say suppose if you have purchased fruit which is of 75 rupees, right? You are having now 25 rupees in your wallet. That is your DQ. Okay. So DU tells you about, for a closed system, you have, I'm just bringing in now another parameter for a closed system, because that will help me in defining the enthalpy immediately later. Can you give me one example of a closed system? You started thermodynamics, right? Can anybody give me the answer? What is a closed system?
The universe, maybe.
Thermos.
The universe itself is like a closed system, right?
What is a closed system?
Like the entire energy basically is conserved inside it. So like we can say that the entire universe, or like someone also pointed out, approximately a thermos also is a closed system. Like its interaction with the outside world is like whatever is outside, it's negligible kind of.
Yes,
No,
you see here.
Transfer
Yeah.
of matter is not possible, but transfer of heat is possible.
Transfer of energy is possible. Okay.
Energy.
Yes.
Yes. So see, your definition should have clarity. In engineering processes, is only clarity that works, right? Yeah, I understand what you want to say in terms of universe, is that you are basically extrapolating that concept. But yes, those who have said that, I really first simplify the whole engineering processes into 3 systems. Let me not confuse in bringing in 1,000 systems. I can really define all the systems, engineering systems, into 3 types: isolated, closed, and open. If I am able to understand these 3, I am a good engineer, right? What is an isolated system? Quickly, somebody.
no heat and mass transfer allowed.
I have a bound, but then no heat and mass transfer through what? You have to be
Through
very clear here.
boundaries, it's a boundaries.
Correct. So there should be a boundary, there is a system, there is a surrounding, and there is a boundary. There are 3 entities of an engineering process. If I schematically simplify, there is a system, there is a boundary, and there is a surrounding. Now, if the boundary is such that it doesn't allow any mass or any energy transfer, that is what is called a isolated system. Example. Any example?
Sir, thermally insulated box. Solid.
Why do you say thermally insulated box? Then you are allowing mass transfer, no?
So it is closed, I mean.
Like say, suppose when you have this flux, thermos fluxes, right? Thermal fluxes, where you keep hot water for long duration, correct? That is a typical example of a batch process. Most of the batch processes, say suppose you have a batch reactor, say suppose you have a pressure cooker and very well insulated, thermally insulated surrounding. So pressure cooker means, I'm just not allowing anything to go out of that particular box. And then what I'm doing, if I'm insulating thermally, then that means, the temperature is also, energy is also not transferring from the system. So any batch reactor where, I have a system where I don't thermally insulated batch reactor, where I don't allow any mass transfer to take place through any of the boundaries. And if I don't want any energy to transfer, that is called an isolated system. Correct? Clear like, daylight.
Yes.
Next, what is a closed system?
Sir, in a closed system, mass transfer is not allowed, but energy can be exchanged through the boundaries.
Very good. Example.
Example can be, sir, like a closed metallic box. We can say a normal regular metallic box in which hot thing is like some hot stuff is inside it, and heat is transferred. Like
same pressure cooker. I just remove the insulation, right?
Yeah.
Same pressure cooker. I remove the insulation. That becomes a kind of closed system. Correct.
Yeah.
Now, what is an open system?
Open system. Both is both are allowed. Like an open pressure cooker kind of.
Example.
Open the pressure cooker. Out the lid.
No. See, yes. I mean, of course, you can. So that's why you need to really be a bit disruptive. So you had just seen these examples, right? Any heat exchanger is an open system.
Yeah.
Because you are allowing both heat and mass transfer, right? Any heat exchanger is an open system. That's the reason why we want to really know these parameters and how to model them. How exactly the formulation starts, how exactly we define the parameters related to energy, mass, and the energy exchanges, and from there, how exactly we really able to formulate them. So closed and isolated system has a big correlation with the batch processes in engineering. I again redefine the whole thing. These are very, very important. As an engineer, more clarity you will have in all these things. You will see engineering is the most attractive subject to study. And then, not only study, teach, and, you will be very, very well acquainted with the devices, how they work. You will have an X-ray vision on everything that is happening in front of you, starting from your mobile, telephone, watch, computer, anything, display, anything is there in front of you. That's the reason why people study engineering. It is not because to get a job. Job is one of the consequences which actually enriches your life in many different ways. It improves your quality of life, but the interpretation has gone the other way around. I'm telling you, if you really can decouple the entire engineering process like this in front of any interviewer, first day you will get a job. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But then you have to really have this sort of clarity in terms of what you are speaking, what are you doing, and how exactly you are bringing in the concepts into formulation, and then you are making engineering devices, which are the money generation machines of the modern world, right? So very interestingly, we introduced one concept called isolated system. Then we now understand what is a closed system, but we appreciate that isolated and closed systems are a group of things. Most of the engineering processes are open system. Am I clear? Is it crystal clear? Now, in this sort of situation, if I really try to define energy of a closed or isolated system and the energy of an open system, how do I define energy of that? How do I define the energy of, say, suppose, let us simplify. I just keep only closed and open system for the time being. I'll come back to your isolated system a little later once we are very much happy with the closed and open system, because isolated system will be an asymptotic case of that. So can anybody tell me what is the energy of a closed system and what is the energy? Mass you understand, right? For a closed system, there is a mass that is sitting inside. For an open system, some mass is coming and some mass is going out. So mass I understand, mass balance I understand very clearly there. Our subject area, which is a little bit vague at this stage in terms of our understanding, is the heat and energy. So if I visualize a closed system, which I am now very clear about, if I visualize an open system, again I am very clear about what is the energy of these two entities? What are the energies of these two entities? Anybody? Jaldi se bolo, jo bhi dimag mein hai bolo, spell out. It will help you, I'm telling you. Those who are spelling it out, I'm telling you, you will go back with lot of insights. Yes.
So the energy which is used to either create the system or completely destroy the system.
Create the system. Say, suppose it is written in front of you, right? I have written internal energy for a closed system and enthalpy for an open system. Why do I define two different parameters? Why do I need to define two parameters?
We can also say that like the system, all the matter, that is the molecules inside the system, are not at 0 Kelvin. So they must have some kind of like they do not have a zero entropy. So this entropy actually causes them to have some energy, like some vibrations basically. So
yes. Again, I go bottom up, right? I really don't like to see engineering processes is very different from scientific processes, because science is always about new inventions, new creations based on the whole concept. Say suppose Newton's law you see, and then you see Newtonian mechanics, then you go to quantum mechanics. There's already always a disruption. There is a framework which works for a few things. There is a framework, that particular framework doesn't work for a few things, you reinvent. And then you go for again you see if you see combined quantum and Newtonian mechanics, you will see they work in a particular framework, they don't work in a few frameworks, then you go for the next level, right? This is the approach of a science. Whereas engineering approach is always bottom up. It has to be definite, because at the end of the day, if you have prepared a ventilator, if you have manufactured a ventilator, and if it is not saving life, then you are in a big soup, right? It has to be very, very definite and bottom up, right? So how do I define internal energy? It has to be very definite and bottom up. So what I say that there are molecular translation, there are molecular rotation, there are electron translation, molecular vibration, electron spin, nuclear spin. I just keep everything together. And everything together for a closed system. Closed system means I just don't allow any mass to flow through the boundary. Right? So, and I just only allow the energy to flow through the boundary. Correct? Now, in that situation, what I say that, what is internal energy? Now, internal energy is the change in the work or the work done because of these molecular movements, these, that, and all. And since you are doing certain work, there is a change in the heat. Now let us go back to the same image that we were studying, that they will be rotating, so some heat will be generated. They will be vibrating, some heat will be generated, right? Now this heat is not again always in the form of temperature, right? It's not always in the form of measurable form. You can really interpret this also in terms of the entropy. So say suppose you have a wheel, an example is given here, right? So you have a wheel like this, right? And then this particular wheel may be sitting in the static water. I did not create any elevation gradient. I have just placed a wheel under a pond, which is a static pond. You may see that these sort of motions are all there. Say suppose you have a fan. on top of your head. Now you turn off the switch. The fan becomes still, right? Now, you know that because of the kinetic theory of gases, because of the incessant motions of the gas molecules, there is a work that is going on every minute. However, that is unable to move your fan. Even if it is moving here and there, what is happening, say suppose number of particles are hitting from one side of the blade of the fan and the number of particles hitting from the other side of the blade of the fan. They are more or less equal and average, and that's the reason why in absence of your electricity, this particular fan is standstill. So there is energy, there is movement, there is work done, there is a heat generation, but at the end of the day, there is no significant engineering work that you are able to extract from a static fan. However, say suppose if I create a kind of dam, right? Say suppose I create a kind of elevation in the dam. Say suppose there is a water that is at the top, and then there is kind of elevation and the water is flowing, and if I place the wheel in the middle, then what will happen, because of this mechanical energy, it will be like able to move this fan round. So if I turn on the switch, I'll be able to generate a potential difference, and that potential difference will force the fan to rotate in a particular direction. Right? So you have to interpret this internal energy, that it is a combination of work and it's a combination of the work done and the combination of the change in the heat content of the system. That's what we call as an internal energy for a closed system. But for a heat exchanger, when the fluid is coming, it is bringing in some energy from outside. When the cold fluid is coming, it is bringing in some energy, it is getting energized, and then the hot fluid is going out, right? So I really need to consider the amount of energy that is moving through the boundary, moving into the system, from the surrounding through the boundary, and then from the system, it is the amount that is moving out from the system to the surrounding through the boundary. So what I do, I define another energy parameter called H, saying that it is not only you, it is not only those molecular vibrations that are important, it is also the amount of mass that is coming in and also the amount of mass that is going out, which we define as a pressure volume work, which we define as a kind of, say suppose you are pumping. So that is nothing but a pressure volume work, right? You can add here like electrical energy, whatever you add, right? So that defines the energy which is called the enthalpy of the process. So for an open system, it is about in addition to your internal energy, you need to add the pressure volume work, because some mass is coming in, some mass is going out, which is correlated to the pressure volume work, right? But then these two are again in the form of the energy balance system, where we really up to this point, we are really hopeful that I will be able to really make an engineering device which can be a perpetual motion machine. I need not invest anything, it will keep on working forever, which is not the case, right? So in order to take into account of that, what has been done, you say that, see, whatever is the heat content in the internal energy, this internal energy, please note that it is also present here. Sorry, this heat content that is that is also present here, right? Now we say that whenever we do work, whenever we do engineering processes, a part of the energy will not really participate in, will lead to some meaningful work, which we define as the entropy. So you see here, they were working very hard. These particles were working very hard until or unless I create an elevation. No, there is nothing meaningful coming out. If I have a fan which is static, So I'm sitting here, right? I'm bombarded by air from different directions, right? And it is unable to move me. Until or unless I make an effort, until or unless I create a potential gradient, I will really not be able to move. Correct? So the internal energy that you the internal energy that you are looking at here, that has a component of this heat and the work. A part of the heat is of course available for you to do work, which is a very low quality work, and the other part is not available to you. Kindly turn off the microphone, okay? I'm having a noise at the back side. Yeah. Now the part of the heat that is not available to me, I correlate with a parameter called entropy. And then I define two very important parameters. One is called the Helmholtz free energy. Other is called the Gibbs free energy. Now, while defining that, I say that one is U minus Ts and the other is H minus Ts. Can anybody tell me what is this? What are these two parameters? What is the physical significance of this? Anybody?
The
Sir,
Gibbs
for
free energy
Gibbs
and
function.
Helmholtz.
What does the physically mean?
Sir,
Sir,
for
Gibbs-
Gibbs function, it was created to as a criteria of spontaneity. It was developed to just tell the spontaneity of the system by just observing the system without considering the surroundings.
See, with that in the context of the discussion that we are having right now, why do you need first A and G, these two?
So they are needed for prediction of the spontaneity of a process.
How do you say? Are you clear about what you are saying?
Not so much.
Can you define U and H now? Is it clear to you what is U and H?
Yes, sir, internal energy and enthalpy. Yeah,
What is that? What is that?
So internal energy is basically the summation of all sorts of energy that a system has.
Closed system has.
Like, yes, a closed system that has like
That is very, very
molecular.
important. That is very, very important. It is the total energy of a closed system, okay?
Yes, sir.
And H, enthalpy, is the total energy of an open system, okay?
Yes, sir.
Is that blunt and clear?
Yes, sir. That clear.
Any open system like a heat exchanger, if you really want to calculate the total energy, you have to look to the parameter called enthalpy. Any closed system, if you really want to look to the total energy of the parameter, you have to calculate internal energy. Is it clear like a daylight now?
Yes, sir.
Now, say suppose I tell you that your name is Himanshu, right? What is your name?
Hemant Pandey.
Hemant, right? Hemant. Say suppose, Hemant, you have 200 rupees in your pocket, right?
Yes, sir.
And then I tell you go and purchase something. Say suppose you purchase medicines.
Okay, sir.
Right? And I give you generally, like, you go to the market with an excess budget, correct? You don't really spend everything.
Yes.
Right? So if you are really planning to purchase medicines, you generally go with say 200 rupees and you come back with 100 rupees, right?
Okay, sir.
The other way, if I tell you that, can you purchase something which is more than 200 rupees? Until or unless you borrow.
No, sir.
You cannot purchase. So you have a limit of 200 rupees, right? That is your total energy, total financial budget, right? That is H and U. When you are going for an engineering design, you have to really know what is the total amount of energy available. Most importantly, whatever is the total amount of energy will be available, a part of the energy will not be available to you. Even in that 200 rupees, you will not have 30 rupees, which will be with you for an engineering process, right? And that's where the second law of thermodynamics is coming in. Say suppose you have always seen, right? Say suppose there is a water bottle filled with water, right? You
Yes.
have a full water that is there in the bottle, right? Or let me give you an example. Say suppose the waterfall is coming down and then you are rotating a turbine. From there you are generating energy, right?
Yeah.
You convert all the mechanical energy into electrical energy there.
No, sir. There are losses.
There is an
like,
efficiency, right? There is an efficiency. You operate at 40%, 60%, 80%, but you never see that efficiency to be 100%. Why?
yes. So there are losses, many losses like frictional
Yes.
losses.
Yes. So if you, yes,
design
yes.
flaws.
So yes, yes. So if you look at a closed system, okay, the loss is this TS. If you look at an open system, this loss is TS. So that's why you call them free energy. So what is a Helmholtz free energy? Is the energy that is available to you to spend for a closed system, which is called the Helmholtz free energy. And Gibbs free energy is what? For an open system, how much energy as an engineer you have to really do it. Am I clear?
Got it. Yes, sir.
Is it clear like daylight?
Yeah.
First is what is the total amount available. Then you define a parameter called entropy, which is related to the losses that you may incur, right? The loss or the unavailability that you are that are associated with the process, which is a part of this DQ. It's a part of this. It's not the total one, which is embedded in the internal energy, right? That's why you see this is written DQ reversible, right?
Yes.
It's not the entire part. Now, if you subtract that from the total energy available of a closed system, that is called the Helmholtz free energy, which is the energy available. This is the engineering energy. That's the reason why you are defining so many parameters. This is the engineering. So moment you tell me, like, you know, as an engineer, first place, you know, would you look at internal energy, enthalpy and all? No, say no. Give me what is the situation of the Gibbs free energy. If you have a number on that, I have a very good understanding that now what should be my budget, what should be my strategy. Correct? So yes. One very important thing to understand, I have to calculate G, I have to calculate H, right, for an open system, which is the mostly engineering systems are all open systems. So that's why enthalpy and internal Gibbs free energy are the most important parameters. But in order to really calculate my losses, I need to know what is the entropy, right? Yes. So this is the third law of thermodynamics, which gives you the definition of the entropy. See, you are basically calculating from 0 to the freezing point, freezing point to the vaporization point to the point of, like, temperature that you are. So this is the way it is calculated. The losses you can calculate from here. Moment you calculate the losses, you can plug into your total energy available to minus the losses to get what is the free energy. So this particular slide summarizes you 0th, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd law of thermodynamics. What does it say? There are two variables. You first define heat and work. Heat is the low quality energy. Work is the energy that I'm looking for. Right? These two are embedded in my internal energy. And what is my 0th law? That if A and B are in equilibrium and B and C are in equilibrium, then A and C has to be in equilibrium. This is my 0th law. Okay, which is giving me the first law of thermodynamics, which is the energy balance of a closed system. Then I am redefining this first law of thermodynamics, energy balance of an open system. Now this gives me the energy balance, but doesn't give me the directionality of the system. Why? Because I don't calculate the losses here. Then I bring in the concept of loss in the form of the definition of entropy, which is the 3rd law of thermodynamics. I define entropy and then say that after I define entropy, this much energy is available to me, which gives me the directionality to the process. Since there are losses, it cannot be reversible. Since I have started with 100 rupees and I have lost 20 rupees, I will always, even if I want to recover, I'll recover 80 rupees. Right? And that's where lies the 2nd law of thermodynamics. So essentially, this slide summarizes your first 2 weeks of thermodynamics lecture. That is, what is the definition of heat? What is the definition of work? What is internal energy? What is enthalpy? Why do you need entropy? And once you know internal energy and entropy, how do you define Helmholtz free energy for a closed system? which is the engineering energy that you require, and then what is the Gibbs free energy for an open system. Most engineering processes are open system. If you calculate enthalpy, if you can calculate the entropy, you will be able to calculate the Gibbs free energy, and the change in the Gibbs free energy, somebody has said, will give you the process will be spontaneous or not. Clear? Is it clear? Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Everybody is comfortable with what has been discussed?
Yes.
Right? Any questions you have?
Sir, just one thing was there for Gibbs free energy. You said that actually the pressure remains constant, right? Like we assume the pressure to be constant, which is not the case.
Not necessarily. If you can, that we will discuss. You can keep any two variables constant for a single component system. That is coming in the next slide, which is called the degrees of freedom. That is modeling part. I'll be coming with clarity. There's a lot of doubt here. I mean, people say temperature, pressure. I can keep volume also constant. What is the problem with Gibbs free energy calculation? In fact, there are constant volume processes where you need to calculate the Gibbs free energy. How will you do that? So you have to be very open-minded here. It is not that somebody has taken G as a function of T and P and N, and then I go with T and P and N. It is not going to work that way. It is all book. You get my point?
Yes, sir.
I have said what in first law of thermodynamics. If you look at this postulates, what did I say? This is the most generic statement. My slide is visible, right, to you?
Yes, sir.
What does it say? Postulate 5. The macroscopic properties of homogeneous PVT systems at internal equilibrium can be expressed as functions of temperature, pressure, and composition only. Okay? So this can be temperature, volume, and composition also. Right?
Okay, so it's interchangeable, like any two of the three, basically, we can say.
That is for a homogeneous system. For a heterogeneous system, the degrees of freedom will increase. That we'll discuss in the next class.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, that there lies a trick there, and that also has a lot of confusion. See, this is where the problem is, that we are reading books, we are reading internal energy, enthalpy, we are cracking exams. We are doing problems with Gibbs free energy and Helmholtz free energy, but it is not clear in the head. What is that? If that is clear, then calculation is all straightforward. It's very easy and simple. Your conceptual understanding has to have a lot of clarity. After that, what is there in maths? Correct? Any other question? Great. So let us meet tomorrow and we'll continue the discussion. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.